For nearly 20 years, people in the small town of Ashbourne shared the same terrifying story about a figure known only as the Smiling Man. Nobody knew where the legend began, but every version followed the same warning. If you ever saw a tall man standing beneath the old streetlight at the end of Willow Road during heavy rain, never look directly into his face, never speak to him, and no matter what happens, never let him follow you home. Most people dismiss the story as another local urban legend told to frighten children, but older residents refuse to walk near Willow Road after midnight. Several disappearances over the years had only strengthened the rumors. According to police records, every missing person connected to the area vanished during rainy nights, and the final witness statements always described the same detail. A tall man standing silently beneath the flickering streetlight at the corner of the road, smiling unnaturally into the darkness. Daniel Harper first heard the story from his co-workers during a late-night shift at a petrol station outside town. 26 years old and recently moved from London, Daniel laughed when they warned him about the smiling figure. He had no interest in ghost stories or local superstitions. To him, Ashbourne was simply a quiet place where nothing exciting ever happened. But one stormy evening in November, after finishing work shortly after midnight, Daniel found himself walking home alone through the rain when he noticed the streetlight at the end of Willow Road flickering strangely in the distance. The road itself was completely empty, except for one figure standing perfectly still beneath the light. At first, Daniel assumed it was just another person waiting for someone or sheltering from the rain. But as he drew closer, something about the figure felt deeply wrong. The man was unusually tall and painfully thin, wearing a dark coat soaked by rainwater. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, and his head tilted slightly downward so his face remained hidden beneath the shadow of the flickering light. Daniel slowed his pace instinctively. The street around him had become unnaturally quiet. Even the sound of rainfall seemed distant somehow. Then the man slowly lifted his head. Daniel immediately understood why people feared him. The man's smile stretched impossibly wide across his pale face, far wider than any human expression should allow. His eyes looked hollow and lifeless, yet the smile never moved or changed. It simply remained frozen on his face as he stared directly at Daniel without blinking. Every instinct in Daniel's body screamed at him to leave. Trying not to panic, he lowered his eyes and quickly walked past the streetlight without speaking. For several seconds he heard nothing except rain striking the pavement. Then he noticed another sound behind him, footsteps, slow, heavy, matching his exact pace. Daniel glanced over his shoulder and felt his stomach tighten with fear. The smiling man was now walking behind him at the opposite side of the street. His movements looked unnatural, almost jerky, as though he was copying the act of walking rather than genuinely moving like a person. Worst of all, he still wore the same frozen smile. Daniel quickened his pace. The footsteps behind him quickened too. He crossed the road suddenly. The smiling man crossed as well. Panic spread through Daniel's chest as he hurried toward his flat several streets away. Every time he looked back, the figure appeared slightly closer despite never seeming to walk faster. Then Daniel remembered another part of the local legend his co-workers mentioned jokingly earlier that week. The smiling man only follows you if you look at him. Rain poured heavily now as Daniel reached his apartment building and rushed inside, slamming the entrance door behind him. Breathing heavily, he locked himself inside his flat and looked through the window toward the empty street below. Nobody was there. Relieved but shaken, Daniel convinced himself the entire encounter had simply been some disturbed person wandering the streets at night. Eventually, he managed to sleep, though uneasily. But around 3:13 in the morning, he awoke suddenly to a strange sound coming from outside his bedroom window. Tapping, slow, rhythmic. Daniel sat up immediately. His flat was on the 4th floor. Nobody should have been outside the window. Heart pounding violently, he approached the curtains and carefully pulled them aside. The smiling man stood outside the glass, 4 stories above the ground, still smiling. Rainwater streamed down his pale face while his hollow eyes stared directly into Daniel's. One long finger tapped softly against the window. Daniel stumbled backward in terror. The figure remained perfectly motionless for several seconds before slowly raising one hand and pointing toward the hallway outside Daniel's bedroom. Then the figure vanished. At the exact same moment, footsteps echoed softly from inside the flat. Daniel froze completely. Someone was walking through his apartment. The footsteps moved slowly down the hallway while Daniel backed away toward the corner of the room. Every light inside the flat suddenly flickered violently before going dark. In the silence, Daniel could hear breathing somewhere beyond the bedroom door. Then came a soft knocking. 3 slow knocks, followed by a voice. "Daniel," the voice sounded wrong, like several voices speaking together beneath water. "Let me in." Daniel grabbed his phone with shaking hands and attempted to call the police, but the screen displayed only static before shutting off completely. The knocking continued, growing slightly louder each time. Desperate, Daniel shoved furniture against the bedroom door while the voice outside softly laughed. Then silence returned. For nearly 5 minutes nothing happened. Daniel remained frozen in terror until he slowly noticed something horrifying. The smile beneath his bedroom door. A thin line of pale skin stretched unnaturally wide in the darkness below the doorframe. The smiling man was crouching outside the room, watching him. Daniel screamed and rushed toward the window, prepared to climb onto the fire escape if necessary. But as he reached the glass, he saw dozens of reflections staring back at him from the dark apartment windows across the street. Every reflection showed the smiling man standing behind him, even though the bedroom itself appeared empty. Suddenly the bedroom door burst open, the lights flashed back on. The room was empty, no footsteps, no figure, nothing. Terrified beyond reason, Daniel fled the apartment and spent the rest of the night inside his car, parked outside a crowded 24-hour supermarket. By morning, he convinced himself exhaustion and fear had caused hallucinations. Yet when he checked his apartment security camera footage later that afternoon, the recording showed something impossible. At exactly 3:13 a.m., Daniel's bedroom door slowly opened by itself. Then Daniel appeared walking backward into the hallway, smiling. His movements looked stiff and unnatural, and standing behind him in the darkness was the tall figure from Willow Road. Police searched the flat after Daniel reported the incident, but found nothing unusual. Friends and neighbors assumed stress had damaged his mental state. However, over the following weeks, people around Ashbourne began noticing changes in Daniel himself. He stopped speaking to neighbors. He rarely left his flat during the daytime. And whenever someone accidentally made eye contact with him, they noticed the same disturbing expression slowly spreading across his face, an unnaturally wide smile. Then, 3 weeks after his encounter beneath the streetlight, Daniel Harper disappeared completely. The only thing police found inside his empty apartment was his phone lying on the bedroom floor. Its final image showed a dark, rainy street illuminated by a flickering streetlight. Standing beneath it were 2 figures, the smiling man and Daniel, both staring directly toward the camera with the exact same horrifying smile. Since then, new stories about the figure have spread across Ashbourne. Drivers traveling late at night during heavy rain sometimes report seeing 2 men standing silently beneath the streetlight at the end of Willow Road. One is impossibly tall and thin, the other looks almost human, until he smiles.